How's it going, everyone? Jiivita here for a farming setup guide to all the different Earthyams in Boundless. So I've already done a general kind of farming crash course, and now I'm going to go through kind of category by category and show at least some example ways of how to set up these crops. There's so many different ways to set up these crops, each with their pros and cons, and really it's a matter of what do you want to prioritize. The setups I'm going to be showing are more or less prioritizing convenience as far as ease of setting it up and the use of maintaining, harvesting, replanting, etc., etc. My standpoint, the easier it is to set this stuff up and use it, the more I'm ultimately going to end up harvesting. But you could certainly prioritize using space as efficiently as possible, or maybe you're more concerned about looks, etc., etc. So in other words, there are many ways to set these up. So these are just an example of how you could set them up. But first off, we have, of course, our three different types of yams here. So we have our basic Earthyams, Waxy Earthyams, and then exotic Earthyams. A trend that you see throughout the farming system is that the basic crops are fairly easy to make happy, and then each time you step up in difficulty, you'll require more and more stuff to essentially get the maximal, or at least the results you're wanting. So first off, we have Earthyams right here. They like to be planted in tilled silty soil and irrigated with water. That will boost both crop yield and seed yield. If you want to prioritize one over the other, you can use sand to prioritize crop at the detriment of producing seeds, or you can use mold to prioritize making seeds at the detriment of producing the crop. Basic Earthyams don't require any skills whatsoever to plant, so very new player friendly. So if we come over here, you can see that you can plant this simply in tilty soil. It's not a hugely bad way to plant this, as you'll guaranteed get at least one Earthyam with a 1% chance to get an extra Earthyam. But then you'll only have an 80% chance to get your seed back. So not a too bad beginner crop, but if you go ahead and make a hand tiller, either the wood or the metal one, they both do the exact same thing. You can see that will be guaranteed to get the seed back, but then we also have a 20% chance to get an extra Earthyam. So in other words, a 20% chance to get 2 Earthyams. So pretty easy to make this crop completely sustainable. If we come over here and take a look at the Waxy Earthyam, it's a very similar situation. However, if we want to get to that 100% seed yield or make it 100% sustainable, we have to add some water to make it happier. Moving on to the exotic Earthyam, it's the same trend, except we just need even more stuff to make it happy. In this case, if we want 100% sustainability, it needs to be close to up to 8 pieces of tilled soil. You could also use the helper block dark glass in order to boost the seed yield up. However, that will come at the detriment of the crop yield. So either it needs to be next to other tilled soil or it's helper block, as well as some irrigation. So taking a look at some of the Earthyam setups, first off, Earthyams don't require any skill whatsoever to plant, so beginner players can plant these without needing to invest any skill points. And basically you can just come over here. The setup that I prefer is generally 4 to 3 blocks wide, and then you'll have kind of these rails over here with fluids chiseled into them. So you just chisel a recess, and then you can place the water in there. That does require a fluid breaker tool. A way around this, if you don't have a fluid breaker, is that you could plant these in an existing pond. You just kind of have to be careful with removing the blocks of water. But as you can see here, we have 4 tilled silty soil in a row, and then we actually have silty soil on the side here, but with water in it. And something that's kind of cool is that you can use the slope chisel on tilled soil, which means you can slope it, put the water in, and plant crops all in the same space. So if you want to basically maximize your space savings or the usage of your space, you can go as far as to pack 3 things into this one row right here and basically just have a continuous field of nothing but this crop. If you don't like this kind of bump that's created by having this channel, you can come over here and take a precise slope chisel and just take out one corner. The only real drawback to this is that each one of these recesses has to be filled individually with water, which can be a little bit tedious. Plus, if you decide you want to rip all of this out, then you're left with a continuous strip of water that either has to be filled in with blocks or removed with a fluid breaker tool. So and then another kind of interesting little tidbit is that this combination of the water plus the crop makes these blocks kind of basically feel like ice. So something to kind of keep in mind if that's not something you like. But this is a setup for sustainability. If we want to prioritize making as much crop as possible, we can come over here and use sand for the irrigation ditch, and this will get us up to 238% crop yield. However, it will give us a 70% seed yield, so this is not a sustainable setup. So this would be a setup like, say you have extra seeds to essentially burn, so to speak, and you could plant them here for an extra crop yield and kind of get rid of some of your excess seeds. And then it's essentially the same sort of deal over here if we want to prioritize making seeds. So over here we have the mold instead of the sand for the irrigation ditch, and this will get us up to 110% seed yield. So in other words, we have a 10% chance to get back 2 seeds instead of just 1, which will allow you to slowly expand your crop. An interesting concept is maybe have a strip or a line of crops that the first part prioritizes making some seeds, the middle and the bulk of it is sustainable, but then you have a little bit on the end that actually burns up seeds, and so you just kind of harvest and then replant, and you really don't even have to think about it like, oh, well, this section right here is making more seeds, this section is sustainable, and then this section is burning off the little bit of extra seeds that you're getting, etc., etc. But something that is noteworthy is that oftentimes the edges might not be 100% happy, but this is almost a proof of concept is that you can kind of balance the two. So maybe you want just the small chance to get some extra seeds with a decent crop yield. That is certainly possible. Maybe just kind of alternate every other block mold and then fill in with some other block that doesn't affect anything. The possibilities are pretty expansive. Next up, we have waxy earthyams. They prefer to be planted in tilled clay soil, again irrigated with water. That will boost the productivity of both seeds and the crop. If you want to prioritize one or the over, you can use ash to prioritize crop at the detriment of seeds, and then finally tangle for the exact opposite, prioritizing seeds at the detriment of the crop. Waxy earthyams also require 1 point into crop sowing, so you can head over to your skills and you'll either need 1 point into this crop sower right here under crafting, or probably the better option is wait until you can get the farming epic under epic 2. This will increase your crop sowing by 2 levels and increase crop yield by 20%. That doesn't mention anything about seeds, however, so don't confuse this with increasing your seed output. It also doubles the effectiveness of fertilizer, but since fertilizer really only makes the crops grow faster, I don't see fertilizer as really a necessary thing unless you're just really in a hurry. But coming over to the sustainable setup, it's very similar to the regular earthyams. However, since it has a little bit more demands, you have to modify it just a little bit. So as you can see, this edge right here is not 100% sustainable. It's not quite happy. Basically, it needs more irrigation, or it needs to be closer to more water. So this irrigation ditch over here is not fully reaching this ditch over here. So if we want like the same sort of thing where it's just a continuous field of nothing but earthyams, you actually have to do a 2 wide and then an irrigation ditch, another 2 wide and then another irrigation ditch, etc., etc. If you want it to be completely tileable and the ditches to be happy as well. So I'm actually not a huge fan of this setup. I would rather just have, say, a 3 wide crop with irrigation channels that doesn't have anything planted on it. That would have the advantage of using either the square or bevel chisels so you wouldn't fall into it, and you wouldn't have to use quite as much water as opposed to, say, this system where you can't fall into this, but now you have to fill in each block individually with water. But moving along, if we want to prioritize for crop, it's pretty much the same concept. We're just substituting in the block that, prioritizes for crop, which is ash right here. And then the same concept for prioritizing seeds. We just come over here and do the exact same thing, except substituting the ash for tangle. The edges here again aren't completely happy, so the end caps here would need a little bit of special treatment if you wanted the entire thing to be kind of, I guess, uniform. And then certainly you could also find or strike kind of a balance between crop and seed yield if you wanted just a few extra seeds here and there. And then finally we have exotic earthyams. These like to be planted in tilled peaty soil, again irrigated with water. Those will increase both crop and seed yield. Of course, you can use thorns over here to increase the crop yield at the detriment of seeds, or dark glass to increase your seed yield at the detriment of crop. Exotic earthyams also require crop sower level 2, so you either need 2 points into this crop sower right here, or the farming epic down below under epic 2. Coming over here for a sustainable setup, it's pretty much identical to what we've seen before. Again, if you wanted to do a continuous bed of this, you'd have to do 2 crops and then an irrigation channel, another 2 crops, an irrigation channel, etc. Again, I would probably just make dedicated irrigation channels that you don't plant anything in for the same reasons as before. But moving on to prioritizing crop yield, in order to target the crop, we would use these thorns. An interesting trait of thorns is that water will flow through it. So basically anything you can see through, water will generally flow through it. So if you don't have essentially surrounding blocks, you can kind of run into a bit of a water issue. Certainly this water isn't going to go very far just because I've chiseled these blocks, but maybe if I remove this one, you'll kind of get the idea of how it can kind of flood your area unintentionally. The one nice thing about this though is that you really only have to chisel 1 block every so many blocks to place water in, as these unchiseled blocks, as you can see, the water still flows through regardless. And as you can see, this crop would also need maybe some kind of end cap if you wanted it to be 100% uniform, but certainly here in the middle you can get all the way up to 198% crop yield, but you suffer a 70% seed yield, so you basically have a 30% chance to lose your seed with each harvest, which is certainly not an ideal case considering how difficult it can be to find these seeds. And then finally, prioritizing for seed yield, we're going to do the same basic setup. We're just going to substitute the helper block for dark glass. And as you can see, that gets us up to 110% seed yield, so pretty decent. It's only a 48% crop yield, but a good thing to remember is that the farming epic does not affect this number here. So in other words, if you have the farming epic, you're actually getting greater than 48%. Okay, well that concludes the Earthyam setup guide. I hope you enjoyed this video or found it helpful. This was Jiivita. Thanks for watching. If you liked this video, be sure to hit that like button, subscribe if you want to see more like this, and if there's anything you didn't like, please let me know down below. Also, if you like my channel and want to get cool perks, check out my Patreon page. Until next time, peace.